statement that will go out to you. My name is Siviwe Gwachube. I am the DA's Chief Whip in Parliament, but for the purposes of this press conference, I am one of the Congress spokespeople, myself and Werner Horn. Welcome, colleagues, and we are very excited to welcome at least over 400 media houses that are going to be gathered here between Saturday and Sunday. And welcome to the DA Congress. The elective Congress of the DA happens every 3 years. The last time we held one was in 2020, and it was under very different conditions, obviously, during COVID-19. And so we're quite excited to have over 2,000 delegates that are going to be gathered here this weekend so that we can see our party in action. And we are going to be, this is in our view an incredibly important Congress, considering the fact that it is a Congress that's going to be preceding the 2024 local government, national government elections, which in our view are going to be incredibly important for the future of South Africa. So colleagues, this morning what we're going to be doing, we're going to be taking you through some of the key information around the Congress administration and the like, and we will be engaging with some questions from all of you, and from there we're going to be moving across to the actual Congress venue for those of you who want to have some takeaway shots of what it looks like. It's pretty much already set up. And we will take you through to that venue so that you may be able to get a sense of all the prep work that has gone behind it. And so I'm going to be handing over to Greg Krambach. Greg Krambach is our presiding officer, the chief presiding officer for the Congress. And we are joined by Bridget Masango and Dr. Mimi Gondwe, who are also presiding officers. So they are going to be the ones who are talking about the contents of what we are here to do. And also, I just do want to remind all of you that, of course, none of us are able to speak on behalf of the candidates. The candidates ought to do that themselves. We are discussing the actual Congress and how it's all put together and some of the questions that you might have. Over to you, Greg.
All right, thank you very much, Siv, and welcome to the representatives of the media. So I think it's probably appropriate that I start by saying we do take great pride in the way we conduct our internal elections, the democratic institutions that we have entrenched within the party, right from ground level up, our branch delegates coming from around the country, and of course how we showcase that during a federal Congress, which you will now be seeing this weekend. Our delegates have started to arrive. The first buses from the Western Cape and some of the further provinces left at about midday yesterday, so we're really excited as we actually feel the excitement building up and the sense that it's finally arrived. There will be nearly 2,000 delegates that will be attending from all around the country. It's important to note that we are not having a Congress comprised only of public representatives. Our Constitution specifies that at least 45% of our delegates must in fact be non-public representatives. And that gives us an opportunity to make sure that the authentic voice of South Africa is in fact represented at our Congress. The delegates are chosen on a fairly complex formula. They are voted for in their branches, as I've said, audited, and a list of delegates from every branch will go through, and then we rank them, including one of the criteria being, is this branch in an area that isn't controlled by the DA? So it might, for example, be another party's branch, another party's ward in the last national elections, or more importantly, in the last local government elections. And if that's the case, then that branch gets extra points, and all the branches are ranked. And that way we make sure that we have a mix of people from urban areas, we have people from rural areas, but importantly, not only will we be representing the people that actually vote for us, but also the people that we very much like to vote for us in the future. And that branch component, by incentivizing formation of branches in wards that are held currently by other parties, will give us that. As Siva said, we believe this Congress is very important because with opinion polls constantly reflecting the ruling party under 40%, very often as happened in Rapport and has happened in the Social Research Foundation polling, which indicated that the DA has now taken over and has overtaken the ANC in urban areas, we could very well be electing the president of the country at this Congress this weekend, selecting our presidential candidate, because with only 11% in all of these polls confirmed by the ANC and our own polling between us and the ANC, it is now very, very close, and the likelihood of no party getting an outright majority next year is very, very much on the cards. We also have, as Siva said, over 400 members from the media. That, by comparison, was only 100 or so in our last Congress. So it does show the interest in this particular Congress. It shows, I think, that South Africa is expecting something very dramatic to happen in 2024, and therefore this Congress is important for that reason. And we even have media from England and France. So our Congress will consist of just under 2,000 delegates. They will be made up, as I said, 45% of those delegates will be delegates from our branches, our activists, that are elected to represent their particular area and be here. There will be around about 1,000 councillors that will be here as well, as a result of their own internal council elections, obviously MPs and MPLs. There will be a sizable delegation from every province. Every province is well represented. And we will be looking to deliberate and vote on resolutions that add a bit of content to our policy conference resolutions that we took a couple of years ago. And that will include resolutions on building the economy, creating jobs, urban and rural safety, and indeed the restoration of Parliament in South Africa. So we'll also, over the next couple of days, we'll be voting on 43 different resolutions. We'll be seeking to drive the DA's policy agenda and give practical expression to our values of freedom, fairness, diversity, and opportunity. Most of the resolutions that you'll see will talk to the need to build on and extend our policy offer for creating an inclusive society in our country. It'll give, I think, a very clear steer as to where the areas of exclusion are and how we will focus on them and address them. Our Congress is being broadcasted live. South Africans can watch the full broadcast by visiting our particular website, and we also invite those following on Twitter to use
Thank you very much, Greg. Now, colleagues, we are going to be taking questions from the floor. What I'll do is I'll take a group of 3 or 4 questions, depending on how detailed they are, and I'll allocate them to the panel members. So if you can please just introduce yourself and your media house, and we'll take it from there. Any questions? Yes, sir, and the sir next to him, and yes, ma'am, and ma'am.
My name is Norman Masumbi from City Press. My question relates to, yesterday or this week, the leader candidate, Dr. Popalat, sent a video to all the delegates in which she is discrediting the voting system of the DA and the county, which indicates that chances of her signing the acceptance of the results, whether she wins or lose, are high. Has she raised those concerns that she has sent with, that she's talking about in the video with the electoral committee? Is it not also a breach of the internal processes for her to also go out and send it to the delegates
Okay, cool. Thank you so very much. I'm going to allocate that to you, Greg. And I think you may be able to handle the issue around conduct of candidates. All right, so,
Silver Sudia from UFM. My question is on the party. Are you concerned that that it's so predictable that the outcome will simply go to John Steele as a SUV because most of the delegates are white? Isn't that concerning for the debate?
all right, ma'am.
From SABC News. Just in terms of the substantive policy, the economic policies, what are the key policies that are going to be discussed around growing the economy and growing jobs?
Okay. And the last one there is back.
From Kaya 959, just about the chaos we're seeing in the coalitions, just a response from the DA heading towards this conference and reflecting on some of the losses. You've lost Ekuleni as well as Joburg, only gaining time. So as we walk into this conference, how are you reflecting on the coalition government?
All right, cool. Greg, if you can please just to deal with City Press, the voting system and counting. And if you could also be as so kind to deal with UFM concerned about the composition of the voting delegates. And I can come back and deal with SABC and Kaya's questions on policy. And the last question was about coalitions. Yes, thanks.
Thank you for those questions. To address the first question about the integrity of the voting system. So what we are going to be using on Sunday to conduct our leadership elections is a system called OpenVote. It is an electronic voting system which confers a number of advantages. First of all, it's very fast. An error on a manual system when you have to capture 21,050 entries, because that's the number of entries we will have when you take into account all the elections we have. Manually trying to capture and count all of that, human error will creep in after tiredness after many hours. This will be done literally in seconds. So we use OpenVote, and we have been using OpenVote for the last 3 or 4 years. We've used it in previous federal congresses. We've used it as recently as in the Eastern Cape at a provincial congress. It's been used in other congresses. And indeed, it's been used in various caucuses around the country to conduct elections, including the city of Johannesburg. So we believe it's a proven system within the DA. It's been used for a number of years, as I said. In all those years, we have never once had a query or dispute about the integrity of the system and the secrecy of the ballot. Before we even began to use OpenVote in 2020, we were in contact with the CEO of that particular company, and we received sufficiently solid reassurances that none of the issues that might plague other systems actually in OpenVote. And that's why the Democratic Alliance moved on to OpenVote. The queries that have been raised speak to the integrity of the system and the secrecy of the ballot. We don't believe those are issues at all, because what OpenVote does is, just like if you went into an election and a by-election in Johannesburg, for example, or next year in 2024, you will produce your ID book. Our delegates produce the ID book as well. In a manual election or using a manual ballot, you will looked up on the voter's roll, and your name will be found, and the IEC will cross out your name to make sure, other than inking your thumb, that you can only vote once. And that's the same as OpenVote. Issue a code, now we know that voter has got their code, and so that's our mechanism to make sure that that code isn't used again. When you cast your ballot in a national election next year, you have a ballot paper. You might be in a voting district where there are 2,000 such voters. and maybe there are 2,000 ballots filled in, there also should then be 2,000 voters struck off the voters' roll, indicating to the IEC those people have voted. And one would expect the number of strike-throughs and the number of ballots to be the same. But nobody knows in an IEC-run election in this country what strike-through relates to which ballot in the ballot box. And it's exactly the same with Overvote. One file is kept of which codes to vote have been issued, so we don't have a situation where anyone could vote twice. A completely separate firewalled file is kept of the actual ballots, and the two cannot be merged. So we do think the vote is completely secret. I could add that many other political parties around the world also use Overvote, as do various organizations. And so we would not use a system that could be hacked or could be less than secret, because that would compromise the very integrity of our voting systems. So I understand there has been some discussion within the Democratic Alliance, and as you said, by the candidates themselves, or a candidate has raised a few concerns. Presiding officers are here to make sure that the election is run in a fair, impartial, and completely impeccable way, guaranteeing the secret of the vote, and we will do that. We will have candidate agents from every candidate who is contesting a position at this Congress at the count. They will be allowed to observe the registration process. They will be involved from start to finish to make sure that everything is above board. We have already had a demonstration in this very building on Wednesday to demonstrate the actual operation of Overvote, how it is secret in terms of how each delegate may have cast their vote, and the audit trail and the reports that guarantee that. So that has been completed. If there should be any lingering doubts about the system that might have arisen from the video that you referred to, sir, then the presiding officers have the option to address that directly to Congress. And on the pre-scripted Congress program, we already have a Congress program laid out. There is a slot for myself, Bridget, and Mimi to address the delegates and take them through the process again. So I believe there's going to be a very, very wide acceptance of a system that we've used, after all, in the previous Congress and in many other provincial and caucus elections that's never ever had a problem with before, and no one's ever raised the problem with that before. What any candidate might or might not, let me rephrase it, what any candidate might or might not say is not my lane. My job is to ensure a free and fair election. I can't comment, as Siv said earlier, on anything the candidates might be saying. That is for them to conduct their campaigns. We must just make sure that the system works. Then UFM, I don't think most of the delegates are white. To be quite honest with you, I haven't done a racial head count looking through the full list of delegates, because that's not what we do in the Democratic Alliance. We judge people on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin. But you will see the delegates there yourselves on Saturday and Sunday, and I think you're going to find it's going to be the most diverse Congress in our history. Everybody of all shapes, sizes, color, religion, whatever, will be there. And I don't think that any of our delegates vote for candidates based on the color of the candidates and their own color. I think people in the Democratic Alliance judge people on merit, and they make their choice on merit. So to suggest that the Congress is predetermined by a form of racial head counting and ethnic identification, I think that's out of place in the Democratic Alliance. We don't do that. And I don't think our supporters even do that. So we have an interesting situation in my own province, in KwaZulu-Natal. We have a municipality called Umgeni, which is 71% isiZulu speaking, and the voters of Umgeni elected a mayor called Chris Pappas, who happens to be white. A couple of weeks ago, we had a by-election in Mzunduzi. Some of you will know it better as Peter Maritzburg, a 90% white ward, and we had a candidate elected there by the name of Reggie Kanyile, who got 97% of the vote. So in both those cases, the voters, who are representative of our voter base, looked for the best candidate and voted regardless of the color of that candidate's skin, whether it was Reggie Kanyile as a ward candidate or Chris Pappas as the mayor of Umgeni. And that's what I think you're going to see over the next 2 days. There isn't going to be any voting on the basis, I believe, of people's skin color. That's just not what we do in the Democratic Alliance. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Siv has asked me to deal with the policy resolution specifically aimed at getting the economy to grow. So a fairly large number of draft resolutions aimed at taking economic decisions will be debated and voted on by Congress. The first being a reconfirmation of the economic justice policy the party adopted at its policy conference a year or two ago, with a big emphasis on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the fact that it focused on inclusive growth rather than political considerations when dealing with economic inclusion. Other economic focused draft resolutions were about possible abolition of tax and tariffs to get the economy growing, government debt and specifically debt ceilings, affording land ownership rights to more South Africans in order to unlock the potential economic use of land, the independence of the Reserve Bank, and in terms of specifically economically empowering the youth of South Africa, the evolution of the current powers and authority of the National Youth Development Agency into provincial youth development agencies who would be better suited to address the skills needs of youth in specific provinces. So I think that clearly indicates that this Congress will in a major way wrestle with what is South Africa's biggest issue, and that is to get the economy growing and to create jobs. Thanks.
I'm going to be dealing with the Kaya FM question on coalitions. And I think perhaps it's quite important to take a step back about why it was that we entered into these coalition governments. After 2021, it was clear that these coalition governments were going to be incredibly difficult. However, we could not as a political party simply stand back and say, because we did not get enough votes, we're not going to enter into any coalition agreements. We entered into coalition agreements which were difficult, which were large in number, and were always going to be difficult to steer in the right direction, or at least steer in the direction that would serve the residents. But it was important that we tried, because we did not want to say to voters that we stayed away, even though we could save you from what we deemed as a coalition of corruption. And the loss in Ekurhuleni and the city of Johannesburg in particular, I think is very clear that it has been the consolidation of the coalition of corruption, the rise of checkbook politics, the rise of backroom deals, which is not in the spirit of saying, let's come up with a coalition agreement that is public, that members of the public can hold us against, and that is focused at making sure that we serve the citizens. And so, of course, it's deeply unfortunate that we have been voted out as of yesterday in Ekurhuleni, and of course the loss of the city of Johannesburg. But we have committed to sitting in the opposition benches and doing what we said we would do, which is to represent the people. But we've also seen that the multi-party coalition in the city of Tshwane, we've recently elected a mayor in Silius Brink. And of course, we are now moving at pace to try and make sure that we turn the city's finances around, again, focusing on making sure that our primary focus is ensuring that we serve the residents of these metros ultimately. And so this is exactly why, colleagues, it's important, and this is why, as the chief whip in my other role, I have introduced a raft of bills in Parliament to seek to stabilize coalition governments, because the way in which coalition governments are done now are essentially gentlemen's agreements, and some political parties find them more binding than others. And in my view, and in the view of the DA, there needs to be a legislative framework that's going to guide the way in which we do coalition governments going into the future. The guiding, in particular, making sure that the coalition agreements are binding and that they are open and transparent, making sure that we've got an arbiter that's going to be making sure that the running and the management of coalition agreements is apolitical, the possibility of introducing electoral thresholds where you're not going to have a scenario where you have a one-seat party that has the mayoralty in the biggest metro on the African continent, and also ensuring that we have coalition agreements that the public can hold us against too. So this is why we've introduced these bills in Parliament. It's important because this is not just about fixing what has gone wrong in local government. This is about being future focused. And as Parliament, it's important that we think about what would happen if we were to find ourselves in a national government coalition in 2024. It cannot be that Parliament gets to 2024 and only then starts to scramble about how we're going to handle that. There's a possibility, based on the research that we are seeing, that there could be a national government coalition in 2024 and even at a provincial level, particularly if you look at a province like Gauteng, where the ANC has only basically one seat that's standing between it and being in the opposition benches. And so, yes, lessons have been learned. Yes, there have been places where we have done a lot of introspection about how better we could have handled these coalition agreements. And yes, we're taking these lessons going forward to inform the legislation process that we are undertaking and also to inform how we handle coalitions going forward. So I'm going to take another round of questions. I think perhaps it might be the last round, and then we will move through to the venue for those who are interested in taking a turn. Colleagues, last rounds. Yes, ma'am. There. You want a second bite? Anybody else who's had, you also want a second bite? Okay, anyone else who's had a first bite? Yes, sir. And I'll come back to the second biters. Okay, first biter, where are you? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so Natasha, Gavin, and then the second biters here. Oh, did I miss somebody? Some girl. Okay, there's the first biter. Okay, the three first biters here and the second biters there. Okay. Have you abandoned your first bite, sir?
No. Hi, my name is Toby Wickles from Africa. Excuse me. Has the conduct of any of the candidates been flagged by the Federal Council? Been any issues with how the people have run their campaigns? Will Ms. Ngwenya, the head of policy, be chairing the discussions on policy here at this conference? Will she be attending since she resigned 2 weeks ago? If not, who will be the custodian of the DA's policy going into the conference? Will the Democratic Alliance discuss the evolving of the powers of the national government or entertain any discussions on the independence of the Western Cape? And then do you have any confirmations of international organizations or workers groups or local NGOs who are your confirmed guests at this conference? Thank you.
All right. A big first bite. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Somebody from the SABC. On economic matters, what are some of the key policy proposals on the economic transformation of the country, particularly looking at the skewed ownership patterns of the South African economy, on issues pertaining to broad-based black economic empowerment? Are those some of the issues that are resurfacing once again in the DA, particularly when you're looking at issues of redress? Then lastly, on land, what are some of the key policy proposals on land that you have coming towards the Congress, and who will be chairing the issues of those economic discussions? And on the last question pertaining to your electoral fortunes, the Freedom Front Plus was pouring into the DA's voter base. What is your research saying when it comes to you regaining lost ground that the Federal Chairperson Helen Zille spoke about in recent times since her re-election in the last Congress? Thank you.
Thank you. And the two biters here, and then I'll hand over to a couple of people.
I wanted to the withdrawal of Lungile Penyani was said to have a past history that forced her to withdraw from the three positions. And also the team of Dr. Popala, the campaign manager, if you check the Google, when you do a Google search, you will find that there are labels where, what's his name, Solomon Miles, that he's been a sex pest in writing dating back to 2016. Was your vetting system thorough, and what did you do? Did you ignore some of those? And how do you respond to all those that said DA forced Penyani to withdraw from the top position that she was vying for because of her past history relating to the previous work where she was allegedly charged, found guilty, and also having an alleged criminal case?
Okay, cool. Thank you. And the last question from the SABC.
Yeah, on the issue of the energy crisis, we know that it's going to take some time for the situation to be resolved. And of course, people have different views as to the way the ANC government is looking to resolve the issue. So if we were to make the assumption that the DA has significant power next year in 2024, and you actually do have a president at the helm, even though it would have to be done through consensus because it would be a coalition government. If you were in that position, how would you deal with the energy crisis? Would you leave things as they are because the plans in place are satisfactory, or would you do things, very differently?
Cool. Thank you very much. So this is how we're going to handle the questions. I am going to allocate Natasha's question, the SABC, that side on the growth of the DA, to you, Greg, particularly some of the markers along the way of why we anticipate that we are not very far off from the ANC. And the candidate's conduct is also going to go to you, Greg, as the presiding officer. And then, Werner, if you can handle for me some of the key policy questions. So the energy, our economic justice policy, land, and devolution. And I will deal with the issue of Gwen Gwenya. If the other two presiding officers can please deal with the issue of Lungile Penyane and the vetting of candidates. So Ms. Gwenya has received an offer from a multinational company. And in fact, she had indicated her decision to the Democratic Alliance to resign and pursue future endeavors at this place, and had sought to serve her notice so that we can have a smooth transition from her as being the head of policy as we head towards the Congress. And it's been a really good process of handing over, and we've got a team in place that's going to be chairing the policy discussions this weekend. And so we don't think that her absence is going to be much of an issue. As I said, she has served her notice and has really done an excellent job of handing over some of the work that was being done at the policy level. And I think just to maybe just foreground Greg's points here on the growth of the DA. Of course, Natasha, it's going to be incredibly important that the leaders that are elected this weekend understand what it is that we've got to do going into 2024. Our view is that the country is going in the wrong direction. The country is in crisis. And we've got two imperatives that we've got to do. One, we want to bring the ANC below 50%. Number two, we want to grow enough so that we can be the key anchor tenant of whatever new formation of a government we may see in 2024. And that those candidates that are elected are going to have to understand that's what the DA is going to have to do between now and the elections. It is no doubt in our minds that we cannot afford to not grow if we are going to see ourselves as being a key anchor of any coalition governments in 2024. Greg, though, you might have some more detailed responses, and over to you guys.
Thanks, Siv. So I'll take Natasha's question on the growth of the DA, and I'll also answer, I think it was Toby, your question on the Freedom Front Plus, and then as Siv said, Bridget or Mimi will answer the questions about Lungile Penyane. So yes, indeed, you're quite correct that in 2019 the Democratic Alliance polled 20.7%. That was 4 years ago. It's a long time ago, and things have changed a lot in our country. And so we do poll the electorate, as does the ANC, as does other non-political parties, like newspapers and like the Social Research Foundation. And so the numbers coming through indicate that shift in support across the country for all parties. All parties get included in research. And I take as my point of departure the fact that the Rapport newspaper did publish a poll which showed us only 11% behind the ANC and the ANC under 40%. That says to me that the 2024 national election is going to be the most open election we've had in our history. Our own polling confirms what Rapport published, and interestingly, an internal poll that the ANC did was leaked, and it showed, in fact, they were polling even lower than we thought they were polling, in the low 30s. So that's why I say this Congress is important, because the leader that is elected, very likely to be the presidential candidate, and with the ruling party set to plummet by such a large percentage, there's a lot that can happen. So the question then asks about the credibility about our claims that this could be a make-and-break Congress for a make-and-break election. And the best indicator of how our party is actually doing is by-elections, because that's not an opinion poll, that's actual voters that are voting. And for us to do much better in 2024, what we have to do is to break into areas where historically we haven't necessarily been the first choice of voters. And a very recent by-election was held in a place called Enoch Ngijima, in the rural part of the Eastern Cape, a 100% black ward. Democratic Alliance polled 38% in that ward. Just before that, in an ANC stronghold, a very loyal ANC supporting area in the city of Cape Town in Nyanga, we had a very, very pleasing increase as well. So what those by-elections tell me is that the Social Research Foundation, putting us ahead of the ANC now in urban areas, most of our country is now urbanized. Rapport, our own polling, and even the ANC's polling is correct. The by-elections actually do show that the ANC is very frequently now under 40%, and we are sometimes within single-digit points behind. So that's why I think this is a very important Congress, and we have a very open election next year. Tony, I think you said your name was. Is that right? You, sir? Govan, sorry. Okay. Yes, in some instances, the Freedom Front has done better in by-elections, but then so have we. And so there is a contestation between the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus in some areas, but I would refer you to Mogale City, where we got a huge majority in that by-election, perhaps more importantly, on a wider scale, in Ditsobotla. Ditsobotla, the entire municipality re-voted, and that is a truer test, I think, than one single ward where very, very local circumstances and local personalities can play a big role. In 2024, every single VD, every single ward, every single South African is going to be voting, and smaller parties have to spread their resources very, very thinly, unlike they can do in a by-election where you can concentrate. In Ditsobotla, we held up our support, we increased a little bit. The Freedom Front Plus lost half of their councillors. So there are, for every example we can quote of a local situation that might have thrown up an unexpected result, there's another example where it shows our ground recovering, and perhaps one of the more recent by-elections in Ditsobotla, where every single ward voted to reconstitute that municipality, is the best example. We actually have half the Freedom Front support in Ditsobotla, and I think much of that damage in 2019 has now been repaired, and we're confident going forward into 2024 that our main opponent is in fact going to be the ANC, and with single-digit figures separating us, it's all to play for.
Sorry, I asked about whether any of the candidates conducted.
Yes, candidates conduct.
Do you want me to handle that one?
Yes, please.
So, yes, you did. So, you asked, have they been flagged by Federal Council? No. Federal Council is not the arbiter of this particular aspect of our democratic internal processes. In every Congress, you will have candidates that query social media posts, mostly that's what we get, and ask whether in fact that is within our campaigning rules. We have had a few complaints like that. We deal with those. We speak to the people who put up those posts, and we ask them to withdraw those posts if, in the opinion of the presiding officers, they have transgressed the rules. There's been a couple of those, but by and large, this Congress has been characterized by relatively few, and let's hold thumbs that remains in place until Sunday afternoon. Okay.
Thank you. Can we get Lungile Penyane vetting of staffers or support people?
Norman, you asked about, I think you're trying to make specific reference to the Lungile Penyane matter. And I'll start with that, and then I'll move on to the issue of the vetting of the candidates. So Ms. Penyane withdrew from, 3 positions, as you may well know. And I want to just, categorically state that she was not forced to withdraw from those positions. She withdrew from those positions voluntarily because she felt that the current incumbents were doing a good job in the positions, and she didn't feel the need to contest for those positions. And according to our knowledge as presiding officers, she has no criminal record, that we are aware of. In other words, we've not had sight of a document that proves or confirms that she indeed has a criminal record. And as many of you in this room will know, the case with her employer is still pending and hasn't been finalized. So until such a time, we have confirmation of the fact that she has a criminal record, or she doesn't, then, and until such a time that we know the outcome of the case with her employer, she remains a candidate and she is contesting the other positions. With regards to the vetting of candidates, the only vetting that we do is the information that the candidates provide in the disclosure form when they actually do, give an indication of the fact that they want to contest a position. So there are a number of questions that we ask the candidates there. Thank you very much.
Okay, Garvin, you asked about the evolution of powers and the issue of Cape independence. There is no draft resolution before this Congress about either the evolution of powers or the DA positioning itself in respect of Cape independence. But what has to be remembered, of course, is that whilst the Federal Congress is the supreme policy-making body of this party, it's not the only body entrusted with making policy. So when Congress is not in session, Federal Council may make policy, and in certain circumstances, the leader and the National Assembly caucus may make policy. So I think our stance on the evolution of powers, and specifically the thrust for Cape independence, is well known and will be untouched by this Congress. In respect of Samkela's question about the economic transformation, skewed ownership, land patterns of land ownership, and the energy issues. On economic transformation, as I said, the only way in which the adopted economic justice policy of the party is addressed is a proposal that the aspect of the embracing the UN Sustainable Development Goals where we are in government should be impressed upon all of our governments. And those Sustainable Development Goals, as I said earlier, is of course more about inclusivity and addressing objective disadvantage rather than using other markers which may be more political in nature. In terms of the skewed ownership patterns of land ownership, there is a draft resolution to confirm that the party, through what is also a private member's bill already before Parliament, the Land Justice Bill, will try and address skewed patterns of ownership by working towards affording those who live in communal areas and who are interested in title deeds, those title deeds. But once again, as I said, that doesn't take away from the fact that this party has had a long stance that we're not turning a blind eye to issues of land restitution and land reform, but we are not interested in addressing that through expropriation without compensation, etc., etc. So our other stances on those issues remain unchanged and will not be debated by this Congress. Thanks.
All right, colleagues, I think unless there are any burning questions, or if we may want to take one-on-one, are you interested in a one-on-one? Okay, all right, okay, cool. So perhaps we can do a one-on-one, Vanda, so that you can expand a little bit more. Unless there are any burning questions, thank you very much for joining us. I think for us, this is a source of pride for the DA. The fact that we can hold a Congress that is without drama, where we do not have chairs that are flying around, that speaks again. We last had our last federal Congress 3 years ago. There are some political parties who are yet to have won. So it speaks to about the fact that we recognize the value of internal democracy. As a party that's asking South Africans to entrust us or to govern, we value internal democracy as well in the organization. And we encourage contestation of ideas, contestation of positions. And so for us, this is a source of pride. And so thank you very much. Those who are interested in going with us to check out the venue, we will see you there.